Aside from the classic Chinese texts, the Lao Tzu and the Zhuangzi, you often don't find much on Taoism. I'm a Taoist. Actually, it's a combination of Taoism and Buddhism. And before I start recording about some of the more important asteroids that I've been working with recently, I thought I'd make a video on my basic belief system because Taoism as it is doesn't have a lot of detail. Uh, it's basically going with the flow, if you've heard of that. And then Buddhism gets complicated. So you have to kind of supplement your Taoism with Buddhism if you expect your Taoism to go anywhere. And so I tell people that I am a 60% Taoist, 40% Buddhist, minus some of the practice there. But the kind of Taoism that I actually follow, it doesn't have a lot of practice. It's more of a philosophy. Both that and Buddhism uh, is laid out in a way that's not in line with what the standard Chinese depiction of Taoism is. Well, I won't say depiction, but the standard Chinese uh, form of Taoism is. It's more of a Western version of Taoism. So in this recording, I'm going to talk about it because I think this system of looking at things may be beneficial for people who are inclined to be more skeptical of spirituality and religion and all that. If you're looking for something that is kind of a higher system to turn your attention towards, one that keeps the science part to it, but also has a blend of spirituality with it, then maybe this will be useful to you. I find that today it's a lot harder for our society to actually believe in the way that we were raised. And so maybe if you were younger, you remember when we used to still pledge allegiance to the flag and one nation under God, and you had school prayer. But as the internet has basically increased in technology and we've become more skeptical and we've been able to look up things on Wikipedia, we're a lot less inclined to just say, oh, I believe in God or I believe in some higher system, and actually follow that. But there is some interesting science out there which suggests that whether you are a believer in religion or you just have spirituality or you're just a straight atheist, there are still ways to kind of look at the world beyond the immediate. So in this recording, I'm going to explain my basic belief system. It's one that I've developed for myself over the years as I've become more skeptical of kind of the background that I was raised in. And I find that it's a good way to still maintain your spirituality regardless of whether you think there's anything out there after this life. So the I actually call my own belief system Wave Dao or something like it. Actually, this is Jianzi Dao, and that's basically translates into electromagnetic wave Dao. Now, before you say, "Oh my God, this is so stupid! This is crazy! How are you going to make a belief system out of science?" Uh, I think you'll see that there is something to it. Before I proceed, I have to say that I don't know about anybody watching this video, but I personally have had some strange experiences which current science is not able to explain. And part of the reason that I study astrology so much is because I've been looking for answers as to why I have certain dreams. So for example, I've had premonitory dreams for quite a while. It's been 15 years. And basically what that means is I dream of the future. And in some cases you would consider that psychic. In other cases you would just say, I don't know what you would say. But the point is that if I have a dream today, then a year out and subject to certain timing, I can be pretty confident that what I dream of is actually going to happen. This has just been a thing that started years and years and years ago for me. And so part of my studies of astrology and the adoption of this particular system uh, is aimed at trying to get at why that happens. Wave Dao basically is Taoism, which, here we go, which has a science component to it. And it begins with the following assumptions. First of all, we're made up of waves. Now, this is not intended to sound magical. It's just something that is pretty much true. Your body's made up of chemicals, and the chemicals are made up of atoms, and the atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, which obey wave-particle duality. That's the Einstein and the Lorentz and experiments and Bohr and Dirac and all of those early 20th century physicists basically, and even people before that, basically looking at the nature of matter and how it behaves. But later we determined that sometimes particles behave like particles and sometimes they behave like waves. You're made up of particles, but because you've got mostly empty space within you and the electrons are doing stuff, um, you act like a big wobbly wave. And so in your resting state, your body and all the chemicals that constitute your body um, have a kind of firing pattern. They're just jiggling like this. They're not completely silent, and this is the kind of thing that you see on an EEG. However, when you start doing specific things and targeting certain muscles or certain areas of the brain, or you're behaving in certain ways, you start to get coherent patterns. And so this is what's going on in working memory. And I forgot which paper this graphic comes from. But you can see that there is a difference between this activity pattern and this firing pattern here, because here you've got this boom, 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 boom. It's steady. Here it's much more noisy. So you note that the person is using working memory here, and there's kind of a background wave here with the frequency. And so you get this, and this is where you've heard of perhaps gamma waves and beta waves and alpha waves and alertness and sleep and all that other stuff. So your body obeys waves like this. So all of our cell frequencies together make us similar to music or to a song. So if somebody were to get a really, really sophisticated device and scan your electromagnetic frequency or scan your firing patterns in general, they'd come up with something which is, I'm not going to say like this, but it's a really complex wave. And what that reflects is certain activity going on in your brain, certain activity going on in your bloodstream and your heart and your muscles, all firing uh, in coordination with your basic biological central computer, I suppose. But see, songs are interesting because these waves here are very, very complex. They don't look like they obey any particular order. But waves like this can actually be broken down. You can break down complex waves into simple ones. And we do that using something called the Fourier series. Um, you can take a kind of ugly wave like this one and break it down into a bunch of basic sines and cosines. And you can basically model this mathematically. This is how speech recognition and Shazam and your graphic equalizer work. So when you see all those bars jumping up and down, it's because somebody's doing math on the sounds that you have. This particular wave, for example, doesn't look like it obeys any real repeating pattern or anything, but it's actually just 1/2 sine x plus 1/4 the cosine of 4x. I forgot my x right there. But if you broke this down using Fourier decomposition, you would see that this was just two simple waves put together. Okay, so uh, what I have come to believe is that each life is a progression of waves. If your body is a bunch of chemicals and your chemicals are basically just exotic wave particles doing stuff, then people can perform math on you in the same way that they perform math on music. And this lines up with the current physics rage of the holographic universe. Basically, anything that we see can be mathematically modeled as within reason, if you have a bunch of approximations. Now, what I have here is something interesting. Simple waves like sine and cosine, these are the ones that just go like this. They wave up and down. They don't just stop. They don't just go on forever. And because of that, you can have a sense of reality above a certain threshold, and you can model things like a square wave in music. So this diagram below here looks really complicated. It's actually not nearly as complicated as it could be. It basically models a square wave. It goes, it's doing nothing, then it pops up and then it does something, and then it jumps down and it does something, and it pops up and then it does something. But what you'll notice is that um, this waveform here is not a perfect square. It's got a little wobble here. And this one has got a different kind of wobble. And this one has still a different kind of wobble. So maybe these three guys, these three square waves are looking at each other saying, oh, we're so different. Well, but they're not. They're all part of the same function. And the function is actually listed down here. Sine x plus 1/3 sine 3x, whatever. If you graph this, you will produce this right here. And a thing I like to think of, because you can model waves like this, and they're going to continue to repeat, is that a person's life is basically a big series of events. And when they die, they drop below some threshold of experienceability, I suppose. Oh God, that's an awful word. But uh, they drop below some threshold for being viewed according to the dimensions that we can view, because we're not going to be able to pick up the little mini versions of this until something happens and the waves come back together in some other form, and then you've got history repeating itself. But basically, even though this is a single function, we've got some lives here, multiple quote lives. Reincarnation is automatic when you use simple waves to break up complex waves. It's not literal reincarnation, by the way. It's not like I die and then I come back as a specific person. It's more like I die and the wave patterns that constituted me, the chemicals and the certain physics and whatever, they disperse, but then in combination with other things going on in the world, with trees and other dead people and whatever, I basically come back. So your wave can join with other waves. And so this incarnation 2 isn't just a copy of incarnation 1. It's actually incarnation 1 with some other stuff impinging on it. I'll show that in a later slide. By the way, this complex wave down here is actually made up of these. And it's only made up of these. So what you see here, I've broken down to show you what sine x looks like. 1/3 sine 3x, and 1/5 sine 5x, and so on. When you add all these up, you just add them, you get this. So it's pretty amazing when you think about it, that something this different and this complicated can actually just be these guys. Okay, so there's another way of modeling waves. You can actually model waves using something called a Taylor series. The Taylor series for the sine of x is actually this ugly thing here. So when you model waves using a polynomial like this one, especially if it's going to be a trigonometric function, and that's what sine here is, you see the regular sine wave goes up and down and up and down. But you can model it within a window, and for a little while, this function actually approximates this guy pretty well. So this thing here, this black one, is actually the Taylor series polynomial for sine of x. The bottom line is that you can pretend to have something like this by using something like this. Why would you want to do that? Because your calculator doesn't go on forever. It actually has to do things like this. So yeah, this is a good approximation. Now, you can imagine that if I can approximate sine of x using some other function which comes in and goes out, then I can take an analogy like this one, the whole incarnation one, and I can model it using a bunch of temporary folks coming in and going out. So let's pretend that the sine wave is your life, and let's pretend that this black line right here is your circumstances for just a little while. So for a little while, let's say this describes you in high school or whatever. So here's your high school. For a little while you're in high school, and then high school goes away. Okay, well, so you're going to do some other stuff for the rest of your life. But you can actually use another function to zoom in on those new circumstances, and this is what that looks like. So again, one of the things that I've kind of come to believe personally is that our lives trade out circumstances. So this purple one here is circumstance set 1, and you're in it, and then for a while you're doing the purple thing, and then purple goes away, but your blue comes in, and this is just another Taylor series polynomial. Like, this is just actual math that I did on Desmos.com. Awesome site, by the way. And I have 3 functions here. I have the purple circumstances, the blue circumstances, which kind of overlap and then take over, and then the green circumstances, which take over where the blue one leaves off. You can imagine that this is a really happy relationship or something, and this is one that sucks because it starts off, it comes from nowhere, and then it just goes, and then terrible. But as that one's going away, it gets replaced by some other function. So these three circumstances can actually kind of trace the different expressive patterns in your life. Okay, so if you remove your attention to your own life, by the way, say here's you, the red, and if we stop paying attention to just ourselves, then you can actually just look at the circumstances. And if you're looking only at the circumstances, then it allows you to see where you're at more clearly. And being able to see number one, number two, and number three here is kind of the basis of spirituality. So, well, I guess that's what I have on this slide. If you can kind of predict where this purple is going, even though it hasn't collided with your reality yet, or you can predict how this purple will kind of redirect itself, then it's related to spirituality. I have a definition of spirituality for myself, and it's basically the extra information that comes with a thing. There's a little bit more to it than that, but the point is that, I can look at you and I can see you with my eyes and hear you with my ears, but there are some internal assumptions that I make about you that everybody tends to make. And those internal assumptions, although they're not directly perceivable from you, are actually assumptions that everybody has. And so they're basically a part of you. You're a jerk, or you're a good guy, or you're a studious woman, or something like that. Reading that extra information on you is basically like reading spirituality, at least if we want a science for studying spirituality. So being able to read these things which are just off of your reality but still related to the functions which describe your circumstance helps you build up your spirituality. Okay, so in-life karma, it means that you do things now towards relationships later. I don't think enough people notice this, because if they did, they'd probably be better towards others. But it's the idea that certain relationships you have, in fact, all relationships you have, tend to repeat certain themes. So that boss that you worked for, you got along with them in a certain way, and then later you had a different boss, and you got along with them in kind of a similar-ish way, but some of the characteristics that that first boss had are now displayed by your significant other. Okay, so basically throughout your life, you've got certain characteristics that keep scrambling themselves among the various folks that you're dealing with. I've noticed this a lot, and so this was one of the reasons that I started studying this, because I was trying to explain what I called slots for people. That's another story, but the bottom line is that basically we've got this recurring theme that describes your life still, but circumstances 1, 2, and 3, even though they don't seem like they're related, they're actually all part of the same function, and they trade out in terms of their salience. So when you have waves like this, this piece attached to the X is actually the frequency. So this is a frequency of 3, this is a frequency of 5, that's a frequency of 11, and so on. When you're working with these frequencies, you can actually do something interesting with them. So you can map something called frequency space. Now this looks a little bit complicated, but let me go back to Tao for a second. The Tao means following the natural way, going with the flow of something. But going with the flow of what? For me personally, wave Tao is about following the waves that are most natural to you. But when I say waves, I don't really mean this abstract thing. Of course, the mathematical version applies, but I'm not going to know what my levels of serotonin or a glutamine or acetylcholine or GABA are. Those are like neurotransmitters and stuff. I'm not going to know what those are. But I have them in certain proportions in my body, and you do too. And when they fire, according to the chemicals and whatever food you've eaten and whatever kind of training you've gotten, they have a particular frequency for whatever channels are involved. So your genetics and your upbringing and basically your biochemistry parcels out these particles in these waves in a certain way, and they produce different mathematically modelable frequencies. Now, those modelable frequencies are complex waves, and they can be broken down into simple waves, which is what we've already talked about. But the simple waves have these frequencies here, which can be mapped in frequency space. And so you can have one wave that makes 3 cycles per window. You can have another wave that makes 5 cycles per window, and another wave that makes 1 cycle per window, and you just add them up with different amplitudes. So this 1/3, you have only 1/3 of these. You have only 1/5 of these. And you only have 1/7 of these, but you have 1/2 of these. And again, this is just Fourier series. But so you can take a frequency space and wrap it around in a circle. So you can have the 3 move up to the 4, move up to the 5, and so on and so forth. But you don't want to have that go on forever because, you know, things end, people die, and whatever. So if you wrap them around in a circle, you can basically say, here's a slow wave, and the frequency gets faster and faster and faster until it gets really fast at the end of the circle. But then we just kind of forget about it at the end and we start again because our biological counter doesn't want to go past a certain point. So you can start and end this circle with doubles, quadruples, and powers of 2 for each wave frequency. Why would it be powers of 2? Well, take a look at this sine wave. This black one here is the sine wave. It's just a basic 1 repeat, 1 cycle right there. But that's sine of x, by the way. Sine of 2x does that twice. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so sine of 2x has 2 repeats per 1 repeat. And the next one that really does that is going to be sine of 4x, because it's going to have 2 repeats for every sine of 2x. So you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, just like music notes. So here we've got the C note right here at a frequency of about 16 hertz. And then when you move 1 octave up, it's a frequency of about 32 hertz. And when you move another octave up, it doubles again. And this is just how music notes work. And they sound nice. They sound similar to each other. And that's because their waves do this thing. They do powers of 2. And you can do that too. You wrap it around in a circle. When you do that, circles, if you're familiar with geometry, can be graphed on the x and the y. But we don't do x and y in engineering. What we do instead is something like the real and imaginary axis, where this is real energy, and this is something like potential energy. So if you graph things like this, don't worry about the madness with the lines. I'll get back to that in a second. If you graph your frequency space circle here, you find that 12 is actually the best division of the circle because it enables midpoints in the same direction. This is for trig reasons, and I'll show it to you on Desmos in a second. But the point is that you could actually divide your frequency circle into anything. So if you look at this picture, for example, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 regions on this frequency circle. There's nothing wrong with 8. There kind of is something wrong with 8, trigonometrically. I'll show it to you again on Desmos. But 12 is better. This division is better than the one that I just showed you. Okay, so when you take those 12 positions on the cycle, this is essentially what you get. You're going to have a real axis and an imaginary axis, but for reasons related to the thing I haven't showed you yet, you end up being able to divide these 12 positions on a circle according to their relationship to each other. The main reason that we do 12 is because 12 enables halfway points. So for example, if I'm on the real axis and I'm trying to do real things, I'm going to have fully real potential out here. Let's say this is the right direction. Actually, let me go over here. This is fully real. If I'm right here, then from the center, let's call that a radius of 1. If I move anywhere randomly on this circle, let's say I move right about there. Well, so now my sideways component, if I stop right here, my sideways component isn't 1 anymore, but it isn't any clean number. It's just some weird fraction or something. Um, the only place that I can really stay on this axis, stay in the real world, and mean something other than 1 and 0 is right in the middle. Because if I'm right in the middle, it allows me to bounce a signal going this way and have some nice symmetry. The halfway points are important because, if you recall, we needed halfway points in order to do this whole chopping in half thing. You see how that hump there can be split right down the middle, and it allows these things to be resonant? Well, similarly, we need to be about halfway down the middle of the real axis here. And so in order to get there, you actually have to, I guess I haven't scaled this right, but it puts you right there. Pretend that that's not moved over. Right here gives you halfway in the real axis. Right here gives you halfway on the imaginary axis. So it's kind of interesting that as you go along the circle, you're talking about real, imaginary, real, imaginary, real, imaginary, real, imaginary. Okay, so dividing it into 12 lets you talk in terms of halfway points. And if you've got cycles that continually repeat, then halfway is what you like. If you have anything other than this, it's just going to get confusing. Okay, so now let me just finish this recording by going to Desmos and showing you why this works. I've got that incarnation thing going. Let's say that you've got a basic function. I'll call it a life function here. This is you, sine of x. This is your life. I don't really like this, so I'm going to go ahead and raise it a little bit. There we go. Raise it up. And since you're not immortal and you don't live forever, you have a start point and an end point. So I actually am going to use a Taylor approximation to pretend that this is your life instead. So I'm going to turn that one off. This is you. You're born, you don't know what's going on, you're a baby. Now you're awake, you do stuff, and then you die. Okay, so this is your life function. Let's say that you have, oh yeah, let me go ahead and use this as your life function instead. There we go. Okay, so now you're alive. Okay, so let's say that you have this thing that's happening. This is a really, really low-level Taylor approximation. It's your first major event. Okay, that's cool. It's nothing really going on there. That's not what I wanted. I'll just leave that. Okay, so you've got that. Now I'm going to have some events come into play. Right here. What's going on here? Oh, other partition functions. What am I talking about? Oh, I know what's happening. Okay, so I've actually turned on some other people. I've activated them. But the reason you don't see them is because I've set them to 0. But if I go like this is actually a windowed approximation for that first encounter. So there you go. So you're encountering that first person for a little while, and then the second person pops up. And these are all just chopped versions of those functions. Second person pops up, and let's say you have a third person. This third person's not showing because I didn't turn the third person on. Let's do that there. Here's your third person. And your third person is, there you go. So these are 3 sets of circumstances, and basically what's happening is that your life is circumscribed by this set of events, this set of events, and this set of events. Now, I know this is actually kind of complicated. Why do we care about this? One, it actually has implications for spirituality because it says that we're modeling people's experiences according to waves, which are basically snapshots of what's going on in their brain and their body at any point in time. And this is a really, really simple example because you've got trillions of cells, I believe, in your body across your lifetime. And so the wave is going to look a lot uglier than this. However, the idea that you can have this as your boyfriend and your girlfriend and then they leave and then you got another one, basically picking up where the other one left off. Um, is something that really does have implications for how you treat people and all that. I would love to say more, but actually, the other stuff that I want to talk about is not related to this topic, and so it's going to be for another video. Um, so this is Wave Dao. It's the idea that everything is modelable by math, and there's a spirituality in that, because the math functions have these little ragged edges that leave reality, but they're still there. And the fact that they're still there means that you can dream of them, you can sense them, and they feel a lot like spirituality, even if you don't see it with your eyes.